Today, we are diving into a really powerful idea from way back in the 16th century, but one that feels incredibly relevant right now. We're talking about John Calvin's concept of Christian freedom. Now, this isn't about politics or rebellion, it's about something much deeper, a kind of inner liberty, the liberty of your conscience. So let's figure out what that actually means. You know that feeling like you're just overwhelmed by a never ending list of things you should be doing? Constantly second guessing yourself, wondering if you're ever really doing enough or if you're good enough. Well, that feeling of being spiritually all tangled up, that's exactly the problem Calvin was trying to solve. And listen to how Calvin himself put it. He saw people who were just paralyzed by fear. Their consciences were so heavy, so burdened, that they couldn't do anything with any real confidence. This constant wavering, this doubt, that's the wound his whole idea of Christian freedom is meant to heal. And let's be clear, this is not just some dusty, abstract theological argument. For Calvin, getting a handle on this freedom was absolutely essential. It was the key, the only key to unlocking genuine inner peace. So, here's our roadmap. We're going to walk through 5 key areas. First, we'll look at why this freedom even matters. Then, we'll break down its 3 main parts. That's freedom from the law, freedom to obey, and freedom with things. And then we'll wrap up with the really crucial part, the limits of this liberty. Okay, first up, why does this freedom matter so much? Well, it's really important to get this straight from the beginning. This is not a license to just go do whatever you want. It's something way, way deeper. At its core, Calvin says Christian freedom is a spiritual thing. Its whole purpose, its entire reason for being, is to do one thing, to quiet a frightened conscience before God. It's all about finding rest and confidence in that relationship. So let's get into the first part of this liberty, and, it's a big one, freedom from the law. This completely reframes how we look at the law. When it comes to being made right with God, our justification, Calvin says our conscience has to rise above the law. What does that mean? It means we have to forget about so-called law righteousness, the whole idea that we can be saved by ticking off boxes and doing good works. Instead, we're called to embrace God's mercy and his mercy alone, looking only to Christ. Because the law, with its perfect standard, can't save us. It can only show us where we fall short. But, and this is a huge but, this does not mean we just toss the law out the window. Being free from the law's condemnation is not the same thing as being free from its guidance. The law still has a really vital job to do. It teaches us, it pushes us, and it encourages us to live a good and godly life. And that leads us right into the second part, which might sound a little surprising at first, freedom to obey. Calvin uses this brilliant comparison to explain the difference. Someone who's still stuck under the law is like a servant, right? They're always afraid they haven't done enough, terrified of being punished. Their work is just never good enough. But a believer who's been set free by grace, they're like a son. Sons don't obey because they're scared. They obey willingly, eagerly, out of love and trust. They know their father will treat them with generosity and accept their imperfect efforts because of who they are to him. And this verse from the prophet Malachi just captures the idea perfectly. That word, spare, it implies this compassionate overlooking of faults. It's the promise that our stumbling, imperfect service is accepted by a merciful Father. And that's what frees us up to serve him with joy, not with dread. Okay, on to the third part. And this is where it gets really practical for our day-to-day lives, freedom with things. Calvin calls these indifferent things. Basically, these are all the areas of life where God hasn't given a specific command one way or the other. We're talking about what you eat or drink, the kinds of clothes you wear, even which days you choose to celebrate. In all these things, our conscience should be totally free from man-made rules that just add unnecessary weight. Because here's the danger, right? If we let our conscience get tangled up in these non-essential issues, we fall into what Calvin calls a long and inextricable maze. It's a rabbit hole. If you start worrying about whether it's okay to use a linen napkin, pretty soon you'll be doubting if you can eat a certain kind of bread or drink a certain kind of water. There's no end to it. I mean, this is Calvin's own incredible image for that kind of spiritual paralysis. If you don't have freedom in these everyday things, your conscience can get so bogged down by superstition that even just stepping on a piece of straw becomes a full-blown moral crisis. You see how essential this freedom is to just having any kind of peace of mind. So we have this amazing spiritual freedom, but how is it supposed to work in the real world with other people? That brings us to our final and maybe most important section, freedom and its limits. Calvin lays out this incredibly wise and nuanced way to navigate this. First, the number one rule always is to act out of love for your neighbor. Second, if your neighbor is weak, meaning they're sincere in their faith, but maybe they don't have all the knowledge and are easily offended, then you should lovingly choose to limit your freedom. Don't flaunt it if it's going to cause them to stumble. But third, if your neighbor is what he calls a Pharisee, someone who is deliberately and maliciously trying to trap your conscience with their own rules, then you must assert your freedom to defend the truth of the gospel. Now, to apply any of this, we have to really get what Calvin means by conscience. It's not just a gut feeling. He defines it as this internal witness that stands between you and God. It's the part of you that holds you accountable before His judgment, and His judgment alone. And this leads to his very famous idea of the two kingdoms. On one hand, you have the spiritual kingdom. This is about the inner life of the soul, your conscience before God. This is the realm where you are totally free. On the other hand, you have the political kingdom, which is all about our outward behavior and our civil duties. And here is the absolute crucial takeaway. Our inner, spiritual freedom does not give us a free pass to ignore the laws of the land. It's a mistake to confuse the two. While our conscience is free before God, our outward actions are still subject to civil government. Inner freedom and outer obedience can and absolutely must coexist. To really drive home the power of the conscience, Calvin quotes this ancient proverb, "Conscience is 1,000 witnesses." It's that inescapable internal courtroom where, at the end of the day, we don't answer to other people. We answer to God. And that right there is the beautiful goal of this entire idea. True freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about having a conscience that has been liberated from the crushing weight of condemnation, liberated from superstition. It's about a conscience that is finally, truly at peace with God, which in turn frees us to live a life of joy and active love for the people around us.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. In our world, with all of its own endless pressures and expectations and noise, what does true freedom of conscience mean to you today?